Welcome back to the Kumiai channel, everybody. I'm going to skip chapter 19 and go to chapter 20. I felt chapter 19 was one of the weaker chapters in the book, which is why I took it out. And it talked about how the system was revolting. I'm just going to talk briefly about chapter 19. It talked about the American Indian movement, the occupation of Alcatraz, which my dad was a part of. A lot of California Indians were part of that. Talked about general revolts in the prison system and revolts at home, especially in gender relations. Certainly, if you have the time, read it. It's worthwhile. But if I'm going to take out a chapter, it'll probably be that. So for the sake of time, I'm going to skip over to chapter 20, which actually really starts when you seamlessly connect seamlessly to chapter 18, the Vietnam chapter. So this chapter was largely about the Watergate affair. And it really was about the general sea change that Americans felt after Vietnam. Because the Vietnam War produced a very low trust in government. For instance, professional people had 40% approval rates. Unskilled blue collar was at 66. And this is at the moment in time where you have the rise of the independent movement, where 34% rejected the Democratic and Republican Party and called themselves independents for the first time. And this had a lot to do with the disillusionment people felt from on both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans. So the Watergate scandal was the first resignation of the presidency. Many people think Nixon was impeached, which isn't true, especially since Donald Trump was impeached twice recently. So there's only been 4 impeachments in American history. The first one is the first impeachment is President Andrew Johnson, which was the president after Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. The second impeachment is Bill Clinton, and the third and the fourth is Donald Trump. So the Watergate scandal was about in 1972. It was about spying on the Democratic National Committee. The investigations, though, opened up a can of worms, and that's really what Zinn, this chapter was about. It wasn't necessarily about Watergate, although that was covered, but what the investigations uncovered was incredibly profound. So the can of worms that was open revealed that there was illegal wiretaps ordered by Kissinger on journalists and government officials. Anti-war was the targets. There was a plan to attack the author of the Pentagon Papers, Daniel Ellsberg, from chapter 18. He's the author of the Pentagon Papers, and to steal his medical records from his psychologist. So they targeted Ellsberg to basically get rid of him. From 1969 to 70, the U.S. hid a secret bombing campaign of Cambodia from the public and Congress. This is what was revealed during the Watergate scandal. Nixon won election after 72. However, he won the election of 72, but resigned 2 years later in 1974 after realizing that they had the necessary votes for impeaching him. Although Nixon was gone, Kissinger remained with the same foreign policy. The government connection to corporate interests remained. And what was more interesting too was, so Agnew, I'll probably always say his name wrong, that was the first vice president of Nixon. He was basically resigned from corruption. So Gerald Ford was his second vice president. They made a deal where if Nixon resigned, he would get pardoned by the vice president. He made a deal to resign, and in addition to that, after he was pardoned, he also got a huge retirement pension in California. Now, I remember driving through Carson City recently, and it said the home of President Nixon. So he's from the Orange County area. So Ford took the spot from the corrupt Spiro Agnew. Agnew was the his original vice president, who was indicted for receiving bribes from contractors in return for political favors. So the Senate committee that oversaw this Watergate investigation was televised. However, it was censored. So this committee revealed the corporate connections, the secret bombing of Cambodia, and the interesting work the CIA, or the extracurricular work the CIA and the FBI were doing. It had a one of the most telling things it revealed was the corporate influence on the White House was a permanent fact of the American political system. So it was the head of the ITT quotes, "You butter both sides so well, so we'll be in a good position whoever wins." So butter both sides meaning you throw money everywhere just in case a Democrat, a Republican, or independent wins. He states whether Nixon or Ford or any Republican or Democrat was president. Oh no, this is what Zinn said. Whether Nixon or Ford or any Republican or Democrat was president, the system will work pretty much the same way. And that was either Zinn or another person. I didn't quote that person, but that was 402 on my teacher's edition. So the investigation revealed corporations were making illegal contributions, and eventually they were going to get off easy. So although it was found out that 3M and Goodyear and American Airlines were doing illegal, there's a process to contribute to campaigns. They weren't going through that process. They were just basically breaking the law. American Airlines was fined $5,000. 3M was fined $5,000. Goodyear was fined $3,000. So at 75, Vietnam ends with troop withdrawal. And one of the things Zinn really kind of central to his thesis is by 1975, the establishment became consolidated. Republicans, Democrats, newspapers, television. And he uses the Marquez affair that proved the idea that American authority. So there was the Marquez affair, which he kind of uses as an example of the media finally kind of getting in line. So during the Vietnam War, as we talked about last chapter, you had like the My Lai massacre, and a lot of these scorched earth policies were revealed by the United States media. And so what happened was, finally the media starting to get in line with the establishment, and uses as the New York Times stating that the admirable efficiency of the operation of the Marquez affair. So it's just more, I guess the moral of the story of that is the media and all the ducks are finally lining up to where the establishment is now won, but after Vietnam. So public spectacle. Okay, so one of the things he talked about in this committee that was formed, it was a public spectacle. And he almost says it facetiously, the system criticizing and correcting itself as if it's actually going to happen. It's more for us, the Joe Schmo who's like, thinks something's going to happen, but it never does. So it's just a spectacle. That's what a spectacle is. It's not really, you're just there to be entertained, So that's what he talked about as this televised committee, Senate investigation, House and Senate investigations. But one of the more telling things in this chapter I found were what the investigations revealed in the CIA and the FBI. For example, the CIA and the FBI, the CIA gave LSD to unsuspected Americans to test the effects. The CIA plotted Castro's assassination and other heads of state. The CIA introduced swine flu into Cuba in 1971. The CIA worked to destabilize the Chilean government. Salvador Allende, who was a Marxist, who was democratically elected in a rare free election in Latin America. And at this point in time, there was the ITT played a part in this operation. That's a corporation in the United States. The FBI disrupted and destroyed radical groups on the left and the right. No, excuse me. destroyed radical groups and also left-wing groups, not right-wing groups, excuse me. The FBI admitted to 92 burglaries from 60 to 66. The FBI murdered Fred Hampton, conspired to murder the leader of the Black Panthers. And I really like the movie Judas and the Black Messiah for that incident. Came out last year. So Zinn states valuable information came out of the investigations, but it was just enough, and it was in just the right way. Moderate press coverage, little television coverage, thick books of reports with limited readership to give the impression of an honest society correcting itself. Again, a spectacle. So one of the things I really like, Zinn talks about all the way in his robber baron chapter, was this kind of conspiracy of the robber barons who were creating an education system that would propagate obedient and people that would not dissent. And it gave people just enough money and just enough power in the middle to not really, I mean, middle class, people, it had a lot of people benefiting from the system, so they weren't going to ruin it. And so this academic conspiracy comes full circle at this, which started in the industrial age at this time. So they revealed that thousands of books were produced, subsidized, or sponsored by the CIA before 1968 to secretly influence the minds of Americans. There were also academics located in all over 100 US colleges. Suspicion remained. So we have here also inflation and unemployment, a really hard time in American history economically, with not just inflation, but unemployment. This all created a decline in optimism about the future. Sound familiar? One of the things that I don't really like, though, about probably one of my biggest, one of the things I don't like about this chapter, I'll just say it, there's no reason to be politically correct, is Zinn doesn't talk about the OPEC crisis of 73 and 74. I just couldn't believe it wasn't in this chapter. I don't know why. Maybe he didn't like, I'm pretty sure he knew about it, but this is why. And, the OPEC crisis was 73, 74. And then 1975, you have 8% unemployment. We recently had 3%, for example, before COVID in 2019, excuse me. So Vietnam, Watergate, student unrest, shifting moral codes, the worst recession in a generation, and a number of jarring cultural shocks have all combined to create a new climate of question and doubt. It all adds up to a general malaise, a society-wide crisis of institutional confidence. And then here, there's another quote in this, my page is 406. And this is kind of someone, this is the rare time where Zinn has something in there that goes against his thesis or against his understanding of capitalism. So there's a quote I thought that was cool to throw in here. So it states, Americans have been taught to distrust the very word profit and the profit motive that makes prosperity possible. To somehow feel this system that has done more to alleviate human suffering and privation than any other is somehow cynical, selfish, and amoral. We must, Simon said, who was Secretary of Treasury under both Nixon and Ford, get across the human side of capital. So I think he put that in there almost maybe to be like, maybe he's talking smack about him, because I know that's not what Zinn believes, but maybe he's just trying to be balanced. I really don't know, but I thought that was interesting. He put it in there. It's one of the few times where he has stuff that goes against his thesis. Okay, so last but not least, I want to talk about the federal budget. So the federal budget evolved from the 1960s. So social spending, for example, was at 22.3% in 1960, and this literally went up 9 points. So 31% by 1974. So you have 31% of the federal budget is being spent on social spending. And this is kind of what we're doing now, by the way, in 2020, 2021, where we're having these infrastructure bills, social spending. I just got my child tax credit today for my 2 children. So we're starting this kind of legacy of social spending, and people are flipping out and they're talking about the debt, etc. So here we are again. However, this would be reversed. What we'll talk about later in the next couple of chapters is how Ronald Reagan would reverse all this social spending, including taking a 1/3 of the Native American budget from the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which affected my family and my father later. So thankfully, not too much. However, at this point in time, the defense budget was 52% by 1969. So that's where we're at today. We're half of the congressional budget, where they have, the Congress can decide. That's what it means, is spent on the military. So we've continued at that 50%, 52%. And largely, we have the debate at the end of Samuel Huntington. I read a couple of his books. The Clash of Civilizations is an interesting one. So he talked about Samuel Huntington and talking about the excess of democracy. He recommends an excess of democracy. Okay. And then there's the Trilateral Commission. And then last but not least, yes, so the Trilateral Commission, which was organized by David Rockefeller and others, saw itself as helping to create the necessary international links for a new multinational economy. Okay, so yeah, that was a pretty light chapter. I didn't really, I think I got the gist of it. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye, everyone.